someone may not care. I mean, I get strange calls like, "Hey, my parents' ashes are buried, are sprinkled in the backyard. Should I disclose that?" I'm like, well, number one, I think it's illegal to have human remains scattered in your backyard, but yes, you need to disclose it.
Even if it's more than 3 years?
Yes, more than. Yes, go ahead.
So I take it that the seller put himself out there to that contingency that at that moment there was a chance of cancellation, or was allowing the buyer the chance of canceling because he already accepted the TDS based on that disclosure.
No, I think it was within the 3-day period of the TDS to cancel, and so that's
That
why he
he
said,
spent
"Let
the
me
night."
spend the night."
Okay, gotcha.
Just.
Gotcha.
What about disclose a repaired roof? Do you think you need to tell the buyer that the seller repaired the roof?
Absolutely.
Yeah, of course.
Why do you think so?
Because it absolves the seller of a problem later if the roof leaks.
Exactly. So did everyone hear that? You should disclose anyway.
Pay
If the
attention.
roof was leaking and it was repaired, why not disclose it? What's the downside, right? You tell the buyer, hey, you got a repaired roof, everything's fine, or at least you just got a repaired roof. Don't say everything's fine. Per seller, roof was repaired, and provide any kind of estimates or anything that invoices that the seller has, and let the buyer verify that. Because the last thing you want is you don't tell them that there's a repaired roof, but what if the roof still leaks like a sieve? And it's not repaired. So they come back to you and say, hey, did you know there was an issue with the roof? Yeah, but I thought it was repaired. But if it wasn't disclosed, you're on the hook as an agent. Seller's on the hook as well. So, how are we on time?
Keep going, but let's get some questions.
Yes, this is disclosure time.
Okay, so I'm moving past the disclosures. I'm going to how to avoid procuring cause disputes. One of the issues I deal with a lot too are commission disputes.
Boring.
And unfortunately, it's just a part of the business. NAR defines procuring cause as the uninterrupted series of casual events which results in a successful transaction. As a CAR member or as a realtor, arbitrations is mandatory. A broker can file with the local MLS board for a procuring cause issue when the brokers are the members of the same MLS board. If not, the broker may file with CAR if the two broker members are with different MLS boards. So I'm going to give you a quick fact pattern on an arbitration that I've done. So I represent this agent who said, okay, I have this buyer. I took him to an open house. I called the listing agent, scheduled an appointment. So I took my buyer to the open house. The owner was also the listing agent of the property, and they spoke Farsi. The agent, didn't speak Farsi, but had the client who spoke Farsi. So anyway, they went to the open house or the private appointment. They looked at the property, and then the buyer and the listing agent started walking around the property by themselves, speaking Farsi, and our agent didn't know what they were saying. But after 30 minutes of looking at the house, they left, and my client asked the buyer, "Well, what'd you think of the house?" I'll think about it. Okay, fine. So 30 days later, 35, 45 days later, whatever, our agent looks on the MLS and sees that the property was sold. Well, out of curiosity, our agent looked on the title records and finds out that the property was purchased by his buyer. And the purchase price was exactly 3% less than the list price. So, of course, we take this to the board. What do you think the board did? The board awarded my client the 3% and told the listing agent and the broker to give the 3% to our guy. I mean, that's a pretty easy case of procuring cause. I mean, that's just a steal, outright stealing a client. They knew what was happening. They spoke Farsi and said, "We'll make a deal. I'll give it to you for 3% less, and we'll cut out your agent." Yes.
What kind of documentation did he have going in that he had represented them? Because that's one of the things I always come up with, what you have to show that you.
Correct. And that's one of my tips is to always have like a buyer representation agreement when you can. Not a lot of buyers like it. Buyers exclusive because they feel that they have better traction with dealing with 5 different agents than just one, but you try to get that. Here, all there was no buyer representation agreement, but there were several emails going back and forth to document, and the buyer doesn't dispute that he actually was there with the agent in the first place. So that wasn't a critical issue in the arbitration. Quickly, arbitration number 2. This was when a broker number 1 shows the buyer a property. Buyer doesn't like it, or for whatever reason doesn't make an offer on it. So he moves on. The buyer moves on and gets another agent 8 months later. And broker number 2 gives them a setup sheet, and one of the setup sheets has the one property that they saw 8 months ago. Says, "I want to look at that property again." So they go to the property again, and eventually writes an offer, and they're in escrow. Broker number 1 comes into the deal and says, "Hey, I showed him this property. I want my commission. I'm the procuring cause." Before we went to the board, we eventually settled this, but a lot of people get in this procuring cause issues when you're dealing with one agent or 2 agents showing the buyer the same piece of property and who gets what. I argue that this was an 8-month time span, and pursuant to the definition of procuring cause, this was an interrupted series of events that happened. They didn't want to go with broker number 1. 8 months had lapsed. There were other properties that were shown, so broker number 1, you're out of luck. But those are typical scenarios for procuring cause.
You mentioned that there was a settlement.
Yeah, and there was a settlement, and usually what happens is this, and this is, I think, one of my tips, but when you have a dispute like this, when it's something that another broker or agent showed your buyer a property, reach out to them. I know a lot of agents say, "Why should I reach out to them?" Because number 1, you want to show that you're an above board realtor. You'll treat everyone, all other real estate professionals, with respect, and you see if you can negotiate some sort of token, nominal amount, nominal referral fee, 10% or whatever you want to do, and you avoid going through the hassle of a procuring cause and arbitration. And I don't know if Stewart's E&O policy covers arbitrations, but if they don't, then you have to hire your own lawyer unless you want to represent yourself in board arbitrations. So be above board. So here are the tips, and these tips you can find from CAR's procuring cause guidelines too. Number 1, always ask your potential client if he has another agent. Number 2, if yes, is there an exclusive contract? Obviously, if there's a buyer's exclusive and it's still in effect, you don't want to work for free.
Okay, so you ask them if they have an agent. They say, "Yeah, I work with somebody, but I'd be happy to work with you too."
Yeah, and I understand that. And so when you get that situation where I have an agent, but I want to work with you as well, that's fine. And what I would want to do is make sure that you're not showing the same properties that another agent has been showing this buyer. And make sure you document all your setup sheets that you're giving them, and take it from there. Go. Yes.
Isn't that a perfect moment to take out your buyer's contract?
Yes, and that's another thing. Always try to get a buyer's exclusive and see what you can do.
Yeah.
But I understand, again,
It should be more.
buyers don't want to be just shoot in with only just one agent. They want to try to maximize their exposure, because they know different brokers or different agents with different brokerage houses may have off-listing, properties. And in this competitive market, they want the best edge they can. Number 3 is a client worked with another broker on the same property. Why did the client leave? So you want to figure out, why they left them. Was it because of price? Was it because they weren't giving full service? What was it? So you could have something documented in your file as to why they left and that you're taking on this new client. Obviously, give agency disclosures early on in the transaction. Use buyer representation agreements. Obviously, exclusive is better, but even if you have non-exclusive, that you have some form of writing that you are actually representing this buyer, that helps. Accompany clients to open houses. I mean, this is like one of these things where it's easy to cherry pick a client. If you tell the client, hey, go check out this open house. I can't make it, but go ahead and check it out. That's when a lot of times the listing agent comes in and says, hey, you can write an offer through me, I can give you a better deal. So make sure you want to try to accompany them when you can to open houses, or at the very minimum, if you can't, give them your card and make sure to tell your client to give your card to whoever's sitting at the open. Number 7, stay close contact with your client. All of these are pretty much common sense. 8, if you're sitting at an open house, keep a registry of everyone who comes in and out and whether they're represented. Number 9, keep a telephone log or conversation log with your client. And number 10, if client worked with another broker, if you can get a disengagement letter from the other broker, that would be great too. That's probably the best thing that you can do, but it's hard to get that, That's pretty much it. Does everyone have any questions?
What letter?
I'm sorry. So the question was, what letter from the other broker? So a letter saying we no longer represent buyer Jose Mendoza. So if you can get that from a broker, and you put that in your file, that's great. I'm sure 9 out of 10 brokers will probably say
Killer.
no. Yeah, pound sand. Yes.
A common problem, an agent in the office is doing an open house on my listing. A buyer comes in, signs a registry, tells them what they're looking for, doesn't say they have another agent, leaves the open house, calls our agent again to show him the property again, then leaves, says thanks for showing it to me, and another agent writes the offer. Okay? And then our agent follows up with the buyer again. The buyer says, well, I chose to use the other agent. What action do you have against the other agent?
And that's pretty tough because we all know that buyers can select anyone they feel comfortable with and using, unless you have a buyer's exclusive, which I'm assuming you didn't have in your case. And, you call up the other broker, you tell them, hey, I showed this property twice, to this buyer, that's my client. But the buyer ultimately is going to say, no, you were just doing this as a courtesy, and I always told you I had an agent, and you're going to end up losing the board arbitration. So maybe you negotiate a referral fee out of it.
I've seen where the other party loses that too.
Correct, and it depends. A lot of these procuring cause cases are fact intensive. So if you have more relationship with the buyer, the more you could show, the more you could document, then the better you are. Yes.
If you represent both tenant and landlord, okay, and you have a dispute for the rent, can you serve the tenant for the landlord?
No.
Can you
I mean, look,
take-
you're talking about property management,
No,
but
you have both agency,
okay. And he fails to pay rent.
and if there is a dispute, who do you represent?
In that case where you're talking about a failure to pay rent or something like that, they're going to hire their own lawyers and a lawyer. You don't even get involved with that. You know, if you can, you could try to help out, hey, pay rent, but
Because the lawyer says the agent can serve the tenant.
no. I would not. If the lawyer asks you to serve something, hey, no, spend $50 and hire a professional process server to get it done, because you don't want to get involved, because you obviously have a duty to the other side as well. Just keep it clean, $50, it's not a big deal.
No.
Yes.
When you started with mold, the new law on mold,
Yes.
can you tell me again what's the new thing when they find mold at the inspection?
Correct. So the
The
new
obligation?
Sure, the new case or the new law on mold says that the landlord doesn't have an obligation to remediate the mold unless the landlord has notice of it, and number two, that it actually is a something that the health inspector or some sort of building inspector came out and assessed it and said, yes, you know, there's actually mold out here, and that's when you have a duty. But
That would be like an official inspector, not
Correct.
necessarily your,
Physical inspection.
correct, not just your physical inspector, but it's something from the city who actually looked at that.
so it's not required by law.
So your physical inspection is not enough.
Correct, it has to be someone from the city. Let me look at the specific language.
And
So-
you can't, as a buyer, call the city out. The buyer can't call the city to
Not all
inspect.
mold is harmful.
Correct, and this is what it says again, so, for a building or portion thereof to be declared a substandard building by virtue of mold, it must be visible mold growth as determined by a health officer or a code enforcement officer which endangers the health of the occupants. And if the presence of the mold is minor and found on surfaces that can accumulate moisture as part of their proper and intended use, that does not constitute a substandard condition. Yes.
Okay, you close escrow, you knew from the physical inspection that you had mold, nobody did anything, and then the tenant goes to the city for health hazard, right?
Well, you close escrow, so it wouldn't be a tenant, it would be just a buyer,
Well,
but,
no, it's a multi-unit building.
okay.
Yeah. So
Okay. So maybe
before
talk to
you
him
close
later.
escrow, do you have to take care of it, or do?
Disclose,
It's up to the buyer and seller how they agree. But yeah, after the deal closes and the tenant goes to the city, the new landlord, the new owner is required to fix it if the city says there is mold, it's significant, and it's not based on their negligence or neglect.
Correct.
Based on the tenants.
Based on, yes, the tenant's negligence.
Any other questions?
Yes? Okay. We've done it. Thank you. Thank you very much. Wonderful presentation. Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, if you'll just stick around for a second after our office meeting, because I know that there's a couple people who will want to ask some questions directly.
Sure.
Okay. Steve?
One announcement,
Yes.
the NAR convention is this weekend in San Diego, starting on Friday. You can still enroll online and you can go for one day.
Which day do you recommend, Steve?
Friday or Saturday, the classes seem to be the best.
Okay. Friday or Saturday, NAR, the National Association of Realtors Convention, and trade show.
Trade show.
And trade show, which is awesome. All kinds of cool realtor stuff and clothing and tools, gadgets, etc. Well worth the trip to Anaheim,
San Diego.
San Diego. Well worth the trip to Anaheim or San Diego. All right, so that's it. Let's go sell real estate. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Still, will you give me 10 minutes?